In the shimmering palaces of Alexandria around 316 BCE, under ceilings painted with gods and kings, a royal girl named Arsinoe II was born into a world where survival had little to do with innocence and everything to do with obedience. She would become one of the most formidable queens of the Hellenistic age, but only after walking through betrayal, manipulation, and the collapse of empires. Her childhood was shaped by the aftermath of Alexander the Great's death in 323 BCE, when his generals, known as the Diadochi, tore his vast empire apart. Ptolemy, one of those generals, claimed Egypt, founding a dynasty that fused Greek logic with pharaonic divinity, and corrupted both in the process. In this new kingdom, the royal family ruled not through love or lineage, but through calculated marriages and absolute control. Inside Alexandria's opulent royal court, Arsinoe and her siblings weren't raised as children. They were state assets. Their tutors trained them not only in literature and philosophy, but in political seduction, in reading expressions for signs of betrayal, in using charm as a weapon. Affection was weakness. Family was strategy. And the throne was survival at all costs. Her earliest trauma remains buried in ancient whispers. Though sources are vague, many believe her own father, Ptolemy V, crossed lines no parent should. Priests justified it with mythology, comparing her to Isis and Osiris, gods entwined in divine unions. But for Arsinoe, it was no myth. It was the moment she understood that her body would never truly belong to her. Before diving into this forgotten story of survival and suffering in the shadow of the pyramids, if you enjoy learning about the hidden truths behind history's most powerful dynasties, consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more content like this. And please comment below to let me know where you're listening from. I find it incredible that we're exploring these ancient stories together from different parts of the world, connected across time and space by our shared fascination with the price of power and the women who paid it. The story of Arsinoe II begins not with love or even desire, but with the cold mathematics of empire. By her late teens, she was married off to Lysimachus, the aging warlord who controlled Thrace and Macedonia. It was a political alliance meant to solidify her father's influence across the Aegean. At that ruthless court, murder was common currency, and courtiers lived in constant fear of assassination. But Arsinoe thrived. Her painful upbringing had turned her into a strategist with no illusions. When she realized that her own children would never inherit while Lysimachus's son Agathocles lived, she acted. Over months, she whispered doubts, fueled rivalries, and quietly built alliances. By c. 284 BCE, Agathocles was executed for treason, and everyone knew who had orchestrated it. But power came with a price. After Lysimachus was killed in battle in 281 BE, Arsinoe fled with her children to Cassandreia, and in an act that shocked even that brutal world, she married her half-brother Ptolemy Ceraunus, not out of love, but because the throne demanded it. This marriage would shatter every last illusion Arsinoe II had about trust. Her new husband, Ptolemy Ceraunus, her own half-brother, soon revealed the true price of power. One by one, he murdered the sons she had borne to Lysimachus, not in a fit of rage, but as cold policy. The eldest was publicly executed under accusations of rebellion around 282 BCE. The second was poisoned at a banquet. The youngest simply vanished. His body never recovered. Arsinoe remained silent. She knew that a mother's grief could be seen as a threat. With every death, she was forced further from who she once had been. What emerged was not a woman broken by tragedy, but one completely reshaped by it. Emotionally numb, politically sharp, and terrifyingly adaptable. She fled once more. This time back to Egypt, which by 280 BCE had changed beyond recognition. Her brother, Ptolemy II Philadelphus, now sat on the throne. He was clever, cultured, and well-read, but far from ruthless. He lacked the iron instincts their dynasty needed to survive in a world where hesitation meant downfall. Arsinoe saw her chance. No longer a pawn, she positioned herself as a kingmaker. In an act that stunned the court, she convinced Ptolemy II to divorce his current wife and marry her instead. It was incest, yes, but dressed up as theology. They invoked the divine pairing of Isis and Osiris. The priests played along, but everyone knew this was about power, not myth. Before long, Arsinoe was not merely queen. She was the one truly ruling Egypt. She erased her predecessor from the records. Former officials loyal to the previous queen were tried for treason or forced into exile. Through swift purges and tighter control, Arsinoe remade the court into a fortress loyal only to her. She introduced new royal rituals, where nobles were required to bow not just to the king and queen, but to the divine union of siblings as gods. Dissent was reframed as blasphemy. Even quiet doubts could be punished as heresy. Over time, the unimaginable became routine. Arsinoe didn't just practice incest, she institutionalized it, making sibling marriage the cornerstone of the Ptolemaic dynasty. Her propaganda machine used both Egyptian mythology and Greek philosophy to frame incest not as taboo, but as divine necessity. For the next 3 centuries, her policies warped the royal bloodline. As brother married sister and parents wed children, Egypt's ruling house became genetically fragile. Mental illness, paranoia, deformities, they all followed. The throne became a prison of inherited madness. But Arsinoe's ambition didn't stop at Egypt's borders. She pushed her brother into war with Antiochus V launching the First Syrian War, 274 to 271 BCE. The campaign won temporary victories, but locked Egypt into a cycle of endless, costly conflict. To tighten her control, she demanded worship as a living goddess. She had temples built in her honor, priests trained to recite her name in daily rituals, and old deities subordinated to her cult. Those who resisted were dismissed or replaced with loyal clergy from Alexandria. The psychological impact of Arsinoe II's reign rippled far beyond palace walls. By the mid-3rd century BCE, the Ptolemaic court had so deeply warped the values of Egyptian elite culture that incest, once taboo even among royalty, was now associated with divine favor. Blood ties were no longer about kinship. They were tools for control. The entire concept of family became infected with politics. Her personal life during this period is veiled in mystery. Ancient sources hint at midnight rituals, possibly involving blood, sex, and sacrifices meant to channel primal forces. Whether these accounts are true or simply later slander, they served her aims, creating fear, awe, and a sense that she operated outside ordinary moral limits. She became an enigma no one dared cross. Economically, her reign was devastating. Massive temple festivals, endless court pageantry, and military ambitions drained the kingdom's resources. While the royal elite grew impossibly rich, taxes soared across rural Egypt. Infrastructure crumbled while Alexandria gleamed, opulence funded by the suffering of those far from the palace. What's most chilling is that Arsinoe showed no regret. Ancient chroniclers describe a woman absolutely certain of her own righteousness. She saw her ascent as proof of divine sanction and wielded her power without apology. By the time of her death, around 270 BCE, she had shaped Egypt into an image of her own trauma. Dazzling, paranoid, and hollow. Her legacy outlived her by centuries. The Ptolemaic dynasty continued her policies, generation after generation marrying within the family. The result was a royal line plagued by madness, deformity, and poor leadership. By the time Cleopatra VII ruled, perhaps the dynasty's most famous face, she was already the product of 200 years of genetic and psychological decline. The final Ptolemies, weakened by inbreeding and haunted by inherited instability, ruled courts where sibling murder was routine and paranoia poisoned every decision. These internal fractures left Egypt helpless when Rome invaded in 30 BCE. The once great civilization had decayed into a stage for dynastic self-destruction, and Arsinoe's shadow spread further still. Other Hellenistic dynasties, the Seleucids, the Antigonids, smaller Greek courts, began imitating Egyptian royal incest, seeing it as a fast track to legitimacy. Her warped model infected the broader Greek world, weakening it in the face of growing Roman power. Modern historians now view Arsinoe II as a paradox. She was brilliant, cunning, and one of the most politically capable women of the ancient world. But the same mind that led her from victim to queen also tore down the very society she ruled. Her intelligence was undeniable. So was her damage. She institutionalized incest, normalized ritualized murder, and corrupted every moral framework that once held the kingdom together. What began as trauma management evolved into civilizational policy. She didn't just survive horror, she made horror law. Arsinoe's story isn't just a tale of power, it's a warning about how unchecked trauma, left unhealed, can be weaponized into state doctrine. Her ability to reshape an entire society to reflect her own psychological wounds stands as one of history's darkest case studies in the cost of survival at any price.